The question, how did medieval armor develop to become more effective, is quite broad, so let's break it down into 4 parts. How did ranged weaponry affect the armor? What types of weapons were most effective against different types of armor? How was the armor styled? And what are the differences between medieval and modern armor? But first, let's have a look at the armor throughout time, up until medieval times. We'll be covering the Bronze Era, the Silver Era, the Classical Era, the Late Antiquity, and finally the Medieval Era. One of the oldest pieces of discovered armor, the Dendra armor, or Dendra panoply, discovered in 1960. The armor was recognized to have been made around 1500 BC. The suit consisted of protection for the shoulders, chest, and lower body, all made of bronze. Next, roughly 300 years later, in 1200 BC, during the Iron Age, a few types of armor began emerging. Scale armor that consisted of many metal plates, scales, that were made of various metals ranging from copper to iron to steel. The scale armor provided decent protection against blunt force, as having many separate parts helped to spread the blunt force trauma across the suit. This, mixed with the scales overlapping, made it a decent option for armor at the time. This age was also around the time we began to see shields getting an upgrade, sometimes housing iron pieces to further help with protection. However, this period came much later in the Iron Age from other inventions like the scale armor. A few hundred years later, we move into the Classical Era. This is where we will find the Romans' most famous battle inventions. For example, many movies and fiction seem to have taken a liking to the muscle armor, a chest covering made of bronze that had a pattern resembling a muscular chest. Another important addition was the popularization of greaves, French for shin. Greaves are a metal covering for the legs. Greaves were first made during the Bronze Age by the Greeks, but were modified and popularized by the Romans during the Classical Era. Greaves, despite being a real piece of equipment, were used heavily in fictional literature at the time. Greaves continue to be modified upon in medieval times, which I'll talk about later. The only thing that I would like to mention about the late antiquity is that mail and scale armor became much more popular, although other developments did happen during this era. Bows had been around for a long period of time before the medieval era, but became increasingly popular in war after the popularization of the longbow and crossbow. These two additions drastically shifted the way war worked in medieval time. During the start of the medieval era, mail armor was incredibly popular, carrying through to the late antiquity. However, this would need to change as powerful bows could pierce through the middle links and potentially fatally wound the knight. To stop this, plate armor began to become the new norm. These full suits of metal armor provided protection from the arrows and joust/stabbing during melee combat. However, having to wear a large metal suit while swinging a sword or weapon was incredibly tiring. The average plated suit weighed around 20 to 25 kilograms, and seeming as the average male during the medieval era is estimated to have weighed around 70 kilograms. That's nearly an extra third of their body weight being added. It is important to note that the weight was distributed, however, and the knights could still move relatively well. On top of this, subpar protection against bludgeoning showed that the suit certainly had flaws. Many weapons were used during medieval times, each having their own use and effectiveness against different types of armor. The 3 types of weaponry during medieval times were ranged, slashing and jousting, and bludgeoning weaponry. One of the 3 main types of offensive weaponry at a knight's disposal, and the most popular, was the sword. Swords were incredibly popular for their customizability, being able to be different sizes and shapes to fit the knight, as well as housing the ability to not only thrust with the pointed tip of the blade, but also to slash and cut with the side, which was equally as sharp. Swords have been heavily picked up by fiction as knights' main/only weapons. However, this is not true. For knights who wish to battle with primarily stabbing/jousting, a lance may have been the best option for them. A lance, derived from the Latin word meaning spear, was a long stick-like weapon featuring an elongated steel tip. During the medieval ages, as well as being used for war, lances were also frequently used for tournaments and performances. An adaptation of a lance was made for the sport jousting, where 2 knights would battle while riding horses, with a lance that was usually more dull to improve safety and prevent fatal injury. Weapons like a mace and warhammer were the primary bludgeoning weapons during medieval times. A warhammer was a hammer with an extended handle that was swung at the opposition, causing a concussion at the least. However, it is important to note that warhammers have been radicalized by pop culture. Unlike in some games and movies, etc., a warhammer would not explode a man's head with one swing. The mace was similar to the warhammer with its incredibly long handle, but instead of a hammerhead, it was several flat points. Armor was styled in a few ways. However, the ways varied depending on what armor the knight would be wearing. If the knight wore mail armor, they could wear a piece of cloth that may have writing and a symbol on it, while plate armor could be colored and also have engravings on it. Engravings could be arranged from a symbol to initials to a variety of other meanings, but the main way knights displayed their alignment was their shields. Shields were commonly decorated with colors, patterns, and a symbol representing their kingdom. War has changed drastically from medieval times. Modern war is nearly entirely focused on ranged weaponry with guns. Because of this, armor has developed to become more effective for said guns. Most ballistic vests in modern times are made of Kevlar. These improved materials make the armor we have much more effective than back then. Metal has been widely left behind with modern armor. Armor has also been improved to be more movement friendly, helping with agility on the battlefield much more.